Welcome and welcome back, everybody, to the OK Grognard Network. Still a little behind after the coming back from the summer hiatus, so we're recording a couple days late on this Periodicals Friday edition. But hopefully you'll forgive me and enjoy what I have to offer. This is a part 2 of the first Dragon magazine retrospective, and looking, oh my goodness, is that Vince? The Vince himself is in the chat. How about that? Thanks for popping in. I know it's a Sunday and you're probably doing family things and enjoying yourself with the young princess and the queen. How is the family, Vince? I hope they're all right. Hey, I'm wearing my EggCon 3 shirt, EGGCon 3, with the dragon on it from Chet Minton, the excellent Chet Minton, and since it had a dragon on it, I thought it was appropriate to wear it for today. Vince says the family's doing great. Thanks for asking. You're welcome. Thank you for being you, buddy. Very exciting. Vince, of course, was on the team that won the Ernie Gygax Memorial AD&D 1E Open at EGGCon 3 this year, and he got a trophy for it and all sorts of accolades and glory. Him and the rest of his team, which is wonderful. And I like to think I was helpful in the education of this one EAD&D player who's been playing in my first edition campaign for a little while and foiling all of my evil plans to destroy all of the player characters. But I don't do that. Of course not. It's very up and up. It's all by the book. We honor the dice. We don't fudge or go out of our way to destroy players, because who could stop you? The DM has access to every monster in the book at any time they want them. If you were actually playing against the players, you'd win. There's just no way you'd lose. So you try to create a neutral ground for players to enjoy themselves in your sandbox, and hopefully they're having fun. Looking forward to playing some more this year. Playing a druid the last couple of years really prepared me for it. That's great. I'm glad to hear it, buddy. Hopefully we'll get a chance to play those characters again real soon. I know September 2nd is Ernie Gygax Day, and we're trying to put a game together for that. So hopefully that will all come together. We'll be talking about that soon, Vince. So that'll be fun. But what's today? What's today? Today, I think we're talking about the first issue of The Dragon. Last time on a Periodicals Friday, we went through the first half of the book up through Len Lakofka's miniature rules, and that was a lot of fun. I think we also talked a bit about D&G chronologically. This website, I'll put a link in the show notes. It's a chronological list that this individual is going through, starting with the oldest stuff and reading through it all. And it's a very good site. It's a very good site to use if you're looking for months and releases in those months from early Dungeons and Dragons. And of course, in 1976, in June, the first Dragon magazine came out, and that's what we're looking at. So be sure and check that out and keep track of everything over there. as you like. What do we got? Let's put that up. We'll just use that entire monitor to continue like we did last time. Let's make this a hand. So last time we talked about Battle of Five Armies and how that was the miniatures. Well, it was a war game, and in this edition, or in this issue of Dragon Magazine, there were some variant rules by the author to take this Hex and Chit war game and turn it into a chainmail miniatures battle. So you've got that to look forward to. We talked about Tim Cast's Dragon Rumbles. We talked about Fritz Leiber's conversation between Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. And we looked further at Diplomacy World, Battle of Five Armies in Miniature. Larry Smith was the name of that original author. We talked a little bit about this article from Wesley Ives on non-prime requisite character attributes, as we did when we were looking at ability score checks in a past episode of the OK Grognard Network shows. Magic and Science. This was James Ward's article tying that together, and then Lee Gold, who had Alarms and Excursions, the APA, the Amateur Press Association zine, early in D&D, and always very helpful. And talking about languages in the game, they talk about Gary Khan and Jake Jaquette. Search for the Forbidden Chamber. Little bit of fiction in here. And hey, by the way, this Wednesday, I think we're going to do an episode on October's Dragon Days Fantasy Festival, which is coming up fast. And I know that Vince will be running some dungeon board games on that oversized exploded board with miniatures that was made by Douglas Waltman. He did just such a great job, and it's a beautiful board. He kept it here. He hasn't. I don't think he's given it to him, but the museum is holding on to that board, and it's getting used in events around town, like Dragon Days Festival and EGG Con, and I think it's kind of under the auspices of Sonia and Paul Stormberg to decide when that will leave the museum and go to a location for event play. And I know. Can't wait, says Vince. Can't wait. Love that game. Indeed. So much fun. Then we had, after that fiction, there was more discussion about Len Lekovs's fantasy miniature rules. And they were smack dab in the middle of that first issue of Dragon Magazine. We're not gonna focus too much on that today. They're there, and they are fascinating. But that's big enough for its own episode at some point. So let's get into the second half here and talk about the Boule. I think this is one of Tim Kask's favorite creatures of all time. The Boule, the land shark, which was a bit of a humorous idea, because it was Land Shark was an early Saturday Night Live sketch joke. It was came on the heels of Jaws being a big blockbuster movie, and the idea is, what if there were land sharks? What if you didn't have to be afraid of going in the water? You just they would knock on the door And Chevy Chase did this great voice from outside the door. He would knock on the door. Land Shark. No, I'm not going to let you in. Candygram. Candygram? Well, it's Candygram. I'll just open the door. And, of course, the Land Shark would eat the tenant. But it is a classic monster. Thought to be extinct until just recently. This horrifying apparition was crossbred from armadillo and snapping turtle stock. Pronounced Boule. It's right there for those who ever wondered and weren't sure. Mapping the dungeons. This issue will see only new DM listings. Also EPT and Parallel Throne DMs if we are notified. These are all D&D DMs who are looking. Paul, well, that's Janelle Jaquays right there from back in the day when she was living in Spring Arbor, Michigan. And, of course, she was instrumental in a lot of content for Alarms and Excursions, Lee Gold's APA zine. There's Joe Fisher, hints for DMs. D&D judges, we're calling them at this point. I got a car going by outside. The studio is never devoid of outside noise. Probably one of the main things that keeps D&D judges from turning their games from a good dungeon into an exciting campaign is a lack of wilderness area. If part 1 of this series helped you enlarge your game with a town or city, this article will enable you to map in the areas surrounding to build other cities, baronies, kingdoms, even whole continents crawling with monsters, treasure, and adventure. And from there, it is a simple step to turn your castle game into a full-fledged campaign. Further information on campaign games will be given in part 4 of the series. So this is part 2, Wilderness. Part 1 would have been in one of the strategic reviews. We're going to go back and look at all of those at some point, but so we'll just skim forward on this. Heritage figures, look at that. That was their idea of a ball rug in the upper right there. And, of course, pikemen were a big deal in miniatures combat. Getting that first strike was always important. And then there's more information here about running Wilderness and how to create maps. Kriegspieler, another miniatures group. And look at this. He's got the Fellowship. There's Boromir with his horn. Legolas and Gimli. 4 hobbits down front. And, of course, Aragorn on the left. And wonderful Gandalf. The store, by the way, doing great today, this entire weekend with that Hobbit Magic the Gathering release. It's very popular. It's already beating numbers for the Lord of the Rings release, and not all of the materials are even available. This set, weirdly, did not include any Commander decks to go along with it. And we also had a delay in receiving our bundles. So even without those things to help the numbers, the pre-release events, both in-store and at home, have been phenomenally well received. Some of the cards just look fantastic, and the artwork on those. So check it out. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings, you may want to pick some of that up just to enjoy the artwork and relive the Tolkien experience through new eyes, so to speak. Previewing June 19th. Well, now, this came out at the beginning of June, so they're cutting it pretty close on the advertisement. Mighty Magic Miscellany, Peter Aronson. This is a way of increasing the levels of illusionists with some spells, some additional first level, second level, third, 6th and 7th level spells specifically for illusionists, which is kind of neat. And I imagine you can use them. Magic Mouth, of course, is a magic user spell of the same name. So there you go. That's already covered. And then we've got an article from Lynn Carter and Scott Bizarre, I think. Bizarre. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. On Royal Armies of the Hyborian Age editions. So this is an expansion of a previous article. Includes national organizations for major nations of the period. Requests from gamer friends in both New York and Texas have encouraged Lynn and I, so Scott is writing the bulk of the article, it would seem, to work out additional national organizations for several of the peripheral nationalities of the Hyborian Age. We appreciate this opportunity to publish material through the pages of The Dragon. This article will list the national organizations of the Kushites and of Juma's Kingdom of Kush's region, as well as Kitai. So, obviously, Lynn Carter did a lot of work with the Robert E. Howard estate to bring his work and recollate it into a chronological presentation. Lynn Carter and Elsprague de Camp, of course, wrote some pastiches to fill in some gaps. They took some of the fragments that were left by Robert E. Howard and expanded them into full stories where possible, and wrote essentially a 12-volume paperback chronological history of Conan, or the stories of Conan, from a young, starting off running across the plains, being chased by wolves, into a crypt where he finds that wonderful treasure, on through his old age. So there you go. Lynn Carter knows a little something about Robert E. Howard and Hyborian fantasy. Adventures in Fantasy. Blast him, Wiz. Wiz is smiling because he's got a spell at the ready now. I'm going to slip on down. Boom! Oops, turned his own buddies into snakes. Oh no, what's your dexterity again, Wiz? That ogre looks a little laughing. Now, we talked a little bit about how TSR really was not and Gary did not despise Tolkien or hobbits or any of the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit stuff. And here's another example. I mean, publishing the Battle of Five Armies game into a box set, for which they got their first cease and desist letter, which included, hey, by the way, clean up your act with the D&D stuff, quit mentioning hobbits and Ents and Balrogs, which was, they were semi-successful in culling that stuff from future printings of the original D&D booklets. But here we are in June of 76, and we've got an article in the First Dragon magazine about how to put hobbits and thieves in dungeon. How about that, Vince? We have found the game Dungeon! To be most enjoyable when each participant plays a different piece. Thus, with the standard game, 4 makes the best match, and when the dwarf and cleric pieces are added, 6 persons are able to play different pieces. Well, there you go. And they talk about Strategic Review Volume 2, Number 1, February of 76. There was a Volume 2, Number 2 as well. I think there were 6 total issues published. With the desirability of adding still more diversity in this game, as well as desirability of allowing for up to 8 different strategies to be played, the following two pieces were incorporated. Subsequent games have shown both The Hobbit and Thief are viable competitors against the standard types as well as against the two optional pieces mentioned above. So there you go. Gary doesn't have a problem with hobbits. He even wants them in the dungeon board game. And this is the information you need. Now, of course, halflings introduced later in subsequent editions under that name, that non-trademarked, non-copyright game name. So, but here you go, right here, The Hobbit and the Thief. You can add them in if you have the original game and just want to include them into that. Classic Warfare. Played some of this at a GaryCon when it was... Nah, it had already moved over to the Grand, but just barely. But this was copyright 1976, Classic Warfare, miniatures rules. I think the DM was a little off. He allowed a group of figures to leave one side of the table and take a certain number of turns off of the table and then come in at another section of the table to flank, which generally isn't allowed because we couldn't have followed them or outflanked them because the rest of the table didn't exist, or the off-table areas did not exist for us to stop them. So it was kind of a miscue on the part of the referee of that particular game that we played that day. Nevertheless, it was a close one and a fun one, and many dice were rolled and many figures were toppled. But, yeah, Classic Warfare. It's an early Gygax. Do you know anything about reprinter, whole or part, or any manner? And then, yeah, there you go. So he's writing this as a discussion of Classic Warfare rules. And so these reviews, Citadel rules and White Bear and Red Moon rules. So they do some reviews in those early dragons that were of non-TSR products, part of their effort to not be a TSR mouthpiece. And that's all good, but at the same time, well, if it's a bad review, aren't we trashing the competition, and is that fair? Some people would find that when they want to put out a magazine that's tied to a company that has their own products, best to keep it as focused on that. And later on, we find that Dragon Magazine and, of course, later Dungeon Magazine were highly focused and only focused on Wizards of the Coast / TSR products down the line. In fact, even in second edition, I think they made the switch. Garrison Ernst, you might suspect, and you would be correct, that is a nom de plume of E. Gary Gygax. Gary himself using a pen name here to slip in some fiction. But interesting that right away in the Dragon, we got a nice couple of pieces of fiction in here, all part of the Dragon Days Fantasy Festival celebration coming up in early October. And I'm sure hoping they get that Gygax Memorial table done. And hey, by the way, that discussion on languages that's in here, they talk about Sylvan, Sindar, and Noldar elves. That's very much a Tolkien thing. So, here it is. The Three Kindreds of the Eldar. Larry Smith, of course, who did the work on the Battle of Five Armies game and the conversion to chainmail miniatures rules that's here in this first Dragon magazine. And he discusses these types of elves and ties them into Blackmore as well as Dungeons and Dragons. D&D hints. There's some more discussion of ways to run games, and then toward the back of the magazine here, the nation's premier war game convention, Gen Con 9. This would have been 76. 75 was my first one, so that would have been 8 at the Horticultural Hall. This one, of course, also at the Horticultural Hall. The next year, they would be moving out to the Playboy Club, which is now the Grand Geneva, where GaryCon is still being held. At least through next year. Dates are already announced, so there you go. Be sure to look into that. And the back of the magazine had some. This is what's coming up in Little Wars, its own magazine at that point, and next issue of Dragon, second part of Gary's article. Gary writes on the history of wargaming for the Little Wars magazine. We've got some EPT content. Dave Arneson writes about World War II naval encounters. Very interesting there. And there you go. That's the end of our look at Dragon Magazine number 1, part 2. I think we're pushing the half-hour mark, so good timing on that. Thanks to Vince very much for popping into the chat today. Glad you had a good time, and I hope you enjoy spreading the word about this part 2. Looking forward to a second part of the guidelines show that will look at a part 2 on the Monster Manual. That's coming up. And Wednesday we'll be looking at Dragon Days Fantasy Festival and what's going on with that, with some information on how to sign up with Dave O'Brien, who's organizing the Dungeon Masters. And don't forget now, it's $20 for both days of the weekend, October 3rd and 4th. But if you volunteer for 6 hours or DM for 6 hours, or believe mix and match, you can get a weekend badge for free. It's $15 for a single day or $20 for the whole weekend. So, if you're in the area, just come to both. It'll be so much fun. Looking forward to that. Again, also, Ernie Gygax Day, September 2nd. Keep that on your calendars. That's right around Labor Day. So run a game. Have some fun. We'll be back very shortly with more content here. Thank you very much for joining us for part 2 of the first Dragon Magazine, a retrospective look and a bit of a educational review as well. And don't forget, shows are recorded on Twitch most Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Then I'll upload it to YouTube for convenient streaming. Share them, please. Like, subscribe, follow, all of that good stuff. It's very much appreciated if you do. And don't forget, you can also join us on my Patreon, even at the free level. Thank you to all who watch and support my efforts. Please back the channel, even at the free level on that Patreon, and join all these other wonderful people who have done so already. And I will just say that this has been the OK Grognard Network. We've got Guidelines Sunday, OS Watch Wednesday, Periodicals Friday, and we'll be doing some other pop-up shows, let's call them, where we're doing some creation. I think I'm going to call them creation stations. They're just going to be fun little episodes that are not as structured as this, and will include some creation aspects to them, whether it's painting miniatures or building little adventures or just populating a map. Just whatever fun stuff I think of that I'm looking to do myself anyway. Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Bye-bye.